They humiliated her. Laughter echoed through the glass atrium as she was dragged toward the exit, her cotton dress wrinkled, her sandals scuffed from the polished marble floor. They threw her out of a Billionaire's product launch, all because she was dressed too simply. "She's a gatecrasher," someone shouted. "Look at her, probably here to steal a sample of the perfume." What they didn't know was this. The woman they just kicked out wasn't a guest. She was the founder's wife. Clara Bennett arrived at the Hudson Yards in New York City on a crisp October evening. The kind of night where the Hudson River sparkled like molten silver and the air carried the faint tang of autumn leaves. The venue, a sleek 21st century architectural marvel perched above the city, was transformed into a fortress of glamour for the launch of Luxe Essence, the groundbreaking perfume line by Ethan Cole, the elusive fragrance mogul whose brand, Aroma Vibe, had redefined luxury and amassed him a 150 billion fortune. The guest list was a tightly guarded secret, rumored to include Hollywood stars, Wall Street tycoons, and fashion royalty. Paparazzi were banned, their drones chased off by private security bots, and the airspace hummed with helicopters ensuring exclusivity. This was no ordinary launch. It was a global spectacle cloaked in prestige. Clara stepped out of a modest Prius taxi, her beige cotton dress catching the breeze. The dress was simple, sleeveless, with a soft drape that hugged her slender frame without screaming for attention. Her auburn hair was woven into a loose braid, a few strands dancing free in the wind. She wore no makeup beyond a swipe of balm, and her only accessory was a small card, her invitation, tucked in her hand. At 36, Clara's beauty was quiet but undeniable. High cheekbones, hazel eyes that held both warmth and steel, and a composure that seemed to anchor the chaos around her. She approached the VIP entrance with measured steps, her worn canvas sandals silent on the marble path. The guard, a towering man named Victor, with a jaw like concrete, stood beneath a canopy of crystal chandeliers. His eyes flicked over Clara's outfit, lingering on the absence of gemstones, designer logos, or anything that screamed wealth. He held up a hand before she could speak. "Staff, go around back," he said, his Brooklyn accent thick with dismissal. He pointed to a service alley where waiters in sleek uniforms scurried with trays of champagne. Clara's lips curved into a faint smile, unshaken. "I'm a guest," she said, her voice clear and steady, like a bell cutting through fog. She extended her invitation. "Clara Bennett." Victor's brow furrowed as he took the card, turning it over as if it might reveal a punchline. "Wait here," he grunted, stepping away to speak into his earpiece. Clara stood alone, the city lights warming her shoulders as the first guests began to arrive. A black Bentley disgorged a trio of women in dazzling outfits, one in ruby velvet, another in midnight lace, the third in a silver gown that shimmered like liquid mercury. Their gemstones caught the light, necks and wrists heavy with wealth. They paused, noticing Clara, and their laughter broke like a wave. "Is she lost?" the woman in silver said, loud enough for the atrium to hear. "That's the intern, here to beg for a spritz." Vichot. Her name was Lillian Drake, a fashion editor known for her venomous pen and vicious X-feed. The other two, Margot Stein, a tech heiress, and Nadia Patel, a pop star turned NFT mogul, giggled, their eyes raking Clara's dress. "Goodwill couture," Margot sneered, snapping a photo with her phone. "This is going viral." Clara didn't flinch. She met Lillian's gaze, her expression calm but piercing, like someone who'd faced worse storms and walked through them, untouched. "You're welcome to ask me directly," she said softly, her tone polite but edged with quiet authority. Lillian blinked, caught off guard, then recovered with a smirk. "Oh, honey, I don't talk to the help." The words landed like small, precise cuts. As Clara stood under the chandelier-lit canopy, a group of influencers and their entourages gathered nearby, their whispers cutting sharper than the river breeze. "She's got some nerve," sneered Beatrice Kane, a lifestyle vlogger draped in emeralds. "Crashing in that rag, probably fishing for a brand deal." Her partner Julian chuckled loud enough for Clara to hear. "Bet she's a barista who stole an invite." Another guest, tossing back a martini, called, "Send her to the subway." Their laughter swelled. Phones were already out, framing Clara as a joke before she could speak. She stood serene, but their words hung like poison, unearned and unrelenting. More guests arrived, men in bespoke suits, women in haute couture that cost more than most cars. They formed a loose circle around Clara, drawn by the spectacle. An older man, Lord Percival Grey, a real estate magnate with white hair and a permanent scowl, leaned toward his companion, a crypto baroness named Svetlana. "Does she know this is a billionaire's launch?" he said, his voice carrying like a stage whisper. "Flea market dresses and scuffed sandals aren't permitted in this section." Clara's fingers tightened briefly around her invitation, the only sign of tension in her otherwise serene posture. She stood straighter, her chin lifting slightly, as if the weight of their stares was nothing new. Victor returned, now flanked by a second guard, a stern woman named Tessa, with a tablet and a no-nonsense glare. "Ma'am," Tessa said, her tone sharper than Victor's, "this entrance is for VIPs. Your invitation checks out, but you don't look like you belong. Step aside, please." Before Tessa grabbed Clara's arm, she stepped closer, her tablet raised like a gavel. "You really thought you'd fool us?" she barked, loud enough for the atrium to hear. "Fake invites don't cut it at a Cole event. Where'd you get this? Printed it yourself?" Guests leaned in, smirking as Victor added, "Confess now, saves us the trouble." A woman shouted, "Bust the fraud." Phones flashed, capturing Clara's silence, calm, unshaken, as Tessa tore the invitation in half, tossing it to the ground. The crowd's cheers stung, their glee at her supposed crime a public execution of her name. To amplify the humiliation, Tessa grabbed a nearby tray of promotional perfume samples and deliberately sprayed one in Clara's face, the sharp floral scent stinging her eyes. "Smell like you belong, at least," Tessa sneered, prompting cackles from the crowd. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of amusement and disdain. Lillian Drake raised her martini glass, her voice cutting through. "Gold digger alert," she called, grinning like a shark. "She's here to snag a rich exec before the keynote ends." Laughter erupted, harsh and unrestrained. Margot's phone was out again, live streaming now, her caption flashing, "Crashing the Luxe Essence launch in this fit. Bold." Nadia chimed in. "Maybe she's hunting for a sugar daddy. Sad, really." Clara's eyes flickered with something. Hurt, perhaps, but buried deep beneath her composure. She spoke again, her voice steady. "I'm here for the launch. Same as you. Let's keep this kind." The words were gentle, but carried a weight that silenced Lillian for a moment. Then Nadia laughed, tossing her hair. "Kind, sweetie? This isn't a thrift store opening." The conflict escalated as a group of influencers, led by a sneering TikToker named Bryce Tanner, began circling Clara, chanting, "Walmart vibes! Walmart vibes!" Dazzling. Their phones recorded every angle, some tossing cocktail napkins at her dress, one smearing her sleeve with caviar from a passing tray. "Clean that up, janitor," Bryce jeered, sparking more laughter. Tessa, the guard, had heard enough. "That's it," she said, grabbing Clara's arm. Victor took her other elbow, and together they began marching her toward the exit, past the shimmering chandeliers and down the glass-walled corridor. The crowd followed, a pack sensing blood. Phones flashed, capturing Clara's simple dress, her braids swaying, the dignity in her stride despite the hands on her arms. "Pathetic," Svetlana muttered, loud enough for Clara to hear. "No class," Lord Percival added, his gold watch glinting. A young hedge fund bro named Lucas Reed shouted, "Send her back to Jersey." The crowd roared, their cruelty a living thing. As the guards hauled Clara through the corridor, a woman in a feathered gown, Celeste Monroe, a perfume critic, flung a glass of champagne at her, the liquid soaking her dress and dripping onto her sandals. "Refreshment for the road, darling," Celeste roared, sparking cackles. A man in a velvet blazer, Theo Vance, a luxury brand CEO, tossed a promotional Luxe Essence vial at her, the glass clinking against her ankle. "Take a freebie, scavenger," he yelled. Another guest, a fashion blogger named Ivy, spat on the floor near Clara's feet, hissing, "You're ruining the vibe." The mob surged, their taunts now physical, filming Clara's stained dress, her braid now damp with champagne, the caviar smear on her sleeve. She walked on, posture regal, but the crowd's savagery grew, a carnival of cruelty feasting on her silence. To push the humiliation further, Lucas Reed grabbed a microphone from a nearby display stand and began a mock auction of Clara's thrift store look, shouting, "Starting bid, $1 for this tragedy." The crowd howled, some pretending to bid, others throwing coins that clattered at her feet. Clara didn't resist. Her steps were even, her face composed, as if she were walking through a rain she'd long learned to ignore. The corridor stretched on, each moment stretching the humiliation. Lillian's voice rang out again. Maybe she thought this was a costume party. Margot's live stream hit 10,000 viewers, comments flooding. Who let her in? Embarrassing. No one stepped forward. No one questioned the guards. The venue's steel gates loomed ahead, cold and unforgiving, promising banishment. Margot's live stream hit 20,000 viewers as Clara neared the gates, her voice a gleeful dagger. This is Clara Nobody thinking she could scam her way into Ethan Cole's world, she mocked, zooming in on Clara's soaked dress, the caviar stain on her sleeve. Total loser vibes. Bet she's begging on the streets by tonight. Comments exploded. Disgrace. Ban her for life. A guest yelled, "Make her trend for failure," feeding Margot's fire. The internet devoured Clara's humiliation, memes painting her as a beggar. To escalate the outrage, a group of guests began chanting, "Clara's crash! Clara's crash!" while one threw a promotional Luxe Essence poster at her, the paper slapping her shoulder before fluttering to the ground. She moved forward, serene, but the global ridicule burned, a wound no one could see. Then a voice cut through, deep and molten, stopping the world. "Take your hands off my wife." The crowd froze, phones still raised, laughter choking in throats. Clara paused, her lips parting in a small, private smile. Ethan stood at the top of the glass staircase, his charcoal suit sharp against the city skyline. At 41, he was a study in contrasts, lean and unassuming, with gray eyes that could warm a room or burn it down. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run a hand through it moments before. He'd built Aroma Vibe from a garage lab, a kid from Brooklyn with nothing but grit and a nose for scents. 10 years ago, he'd been nobody, mixing fragrances on a folding table while living off instant coffee. Clara had been there, his anchor, his truth, when the world saw only a dreamer with no shot. He descended the stairs, ignoring the gasps, the sudden hush. The guards released Clara instantly, Victor muttering an apology, Tessa stepping back like she'd touched fire. Ethan reached Clara, his hand finding hers, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, meant only for her. She nodded, her hazel eyes softening. "Always, Ethan." He turned to the crowd, his presence commanding, a man who'd faced boardrooms and critics and never blinked. "This is Clara Bennett," he said, his voice carrying across the atrium. "My wife. We married 8 months ago in a courthouse with 2 witnesses and a promise. No cameras, no headlines, because that's not who we are." The crowd's shock was palpable, a collective intake of breath. Lillian's martini glass trembled in her hand. Margot's live stream surged to 50,000 viewers, comments exploding. "What? She's his wife?" Ethan's eyes hardened, but his tone stayed measured. Tonight was meant to be the launch of Luxe Essence, a way to share our vision. Clara chose to arrive like this, not to trick anyone, but to see who'd look beyond the surface, who'd show kindness when they thought no one was watching. He paused, letting the words sink in. "You failed her. All of you." His gaze swept the crowd, pinning Lillian, Margot, Nadia, Lord Percival, Svetlana, Lucas. "You mocked her dress, her shoes, her heart. You called her a gold digger, dragged her out like she was trash. You sprayed perfume in her face, threw champagne, smeared caviar on her. But Clara isn't here for wealth. She walked away from a professorship at MIT to support me when I had nothing. No investors, no name, just a formula and a dream. She believed in me when I barely believed in myself." Clara stood beside him, her hand in his, her silence louder than any speech. She didn't need to defend herself. Her grace did that. The crowd was silent now, their earlier bravado crumbling. Lillian's face flushed, her gemstones suddenly garish. Lord Percival gripped his watch, avoiding Ethan's eyes. Margot lowered her phone, the live stream still running, capturing every word. Ethan's voice softened, but it cut deeper for it. If anyone's chasing gold, it's those of you who tore her down to feel bigger. You're not here for creativity or celebration. You're here for clout, and that's not what this night is about. A murmur ran through the crowd, shame mixing with defiance. Lucas Reed tried to laugh it off, muttering, "Bit dramatic, mate." Ethan's gaze snapped to him, and Lucas shrank back. Clara squeezed Ethan's hand, a silent signal. Enough. He exhaled, centering himself, and raised his voice one last time. This stops now. He nodded to Nora Kim, his chief of staff, who stood nearby in a slate gray suit, her tablet already glowing with data. Nora, pull the guest list, cross-check it with security footage, staff reports, anything we've got. Anyone who insulted Clara, name them. They're gone. Nora's fingers moved like lightning, her face a mask of focus. The crowd held its breath as guards fanned out, their earpieces crackling. Lillian was first, her gasp audible as a guard tapped her shoulder. "Ma'am, you're leaving," he said, pointing to the gates. She clutched her purse, stammering, "This is a mistake." But the guard was unmoved, escorting her past the chandeliers, her silver gown trailing like a fallen flag. Margot followed, her phone confiscated to stop the live stream, her protests drowned by the crowd's silence. Nadia tried to blend in, but a guard spotted her, and she was led out, her heels clicking in defeat. Lillian's exit was a masterclass in ruin. Nora stepped forward, voice clear. Lillian Drake, removed for defaming Clara Bennett Cole. Guards marched her out, her silver gown catching on a gatepost, ripping to her thigh. She screamed, "I'm connected!" But paparazzi swarmed, their flashes merciless, as her heels snapped, sprawling her in gravel. Guests gasped, muttering, "She set Clara up." Online, her brand tanked. Asia Drake disgraced trended globally. Lillian's empire of scorn fell in minutes, her name now dirt, while Clara's truth rose radiant. Lord Percival's face reddened as he was approached. "I'm a titan of industry," he barked, but the guard was firm. "You were recorded, sir. Let's go." Svetlana clung to her husband's arm, but he was escorted out too, his wealth no shield. Margot's downfall came fast, as Nora announced, Margot Stein, banned for malicious streaming. Accounts frozen. Sponsors pulling out. Guards escorted her past the gates, her face ashen as paparazzi shouted, "Smile, heiress!" Her phone, now useless, slipped from her hand, cracking on the concrete. Guests whispered, she profited off Clara's pain. Social media turned. Section Margot erased surged, her followers abandoning her. In moments, her digital throne collapsed. Her cruelty to Clara a fatal misstep. Clara's quiet grace stood taller, her victory sealed without a word. Lucas Reed, the hedge fund bro, tried to joke, "Guess I'm not getting that Aroma Vibe contract." But his laugh died as he was marched to the gates. To add to the reckoning, Nora revealed that Lucas had been recorded bribing a staff member to slip Clara a fake invitation, hoping to humiliate her further. His firm dropped him within minutes, his ex-profile flooded with Josh Lucas loses. The paparazzi waiting beyond the venue's perimeter went wild. Flashes lit up the night sky, capturing every exit. Headlines were already forming. Billionaires booted from Cole launch. Elites shamed in NYC. The atrium was quieter now, the air heavy with reckoning. Ethan turned to Clara, his anger fading into something raw. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his voice for her alone. She smiled, touching his cheek. "I wanted to. For us." She stepped away, slipping into a private suite for a moment. When she returned, the crowd's breath caught. Clara wore a couture gown, obsidian silk that flowed like ink, its bodice embroidered with diamonds that glowed under the city lights. Her braid was undone, her hair falling in soft waves, a sapphire clip catching the light like a star. She was stunning, not because of the dress, but because of the woman inside it. Humble, fierce, herself. Ethan took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. The product launch resumed, the stage now set for Luxe Essence's unveiling. The host, a renowned perfumer named Madame Elise, stepped forward, her silver gown rustling. The presentation began as the city skyline glittered, the Hudson River streaked with gold. Ethan spoke of the fragrance, his voice clear, crediting Clara's insight for its heart notes. Clara stood beside him, her presence a promise of their shared vision. The guests, humbled, watched in silence, some dabbing eyes. Lillian's laughter was a memory. The unveiling was powerful, a seal of something unbreakable. As they turned to face the crowd, the applause was soft at first, then grew, a tide of respect. Clara didn't bask in it. She didn't need to. She'd come to test the world and found it wanting, but she'd also found her place, right here with Ethan. The reception unfolded under a canopy of city lights, the venue's rooftop alive with lanterns and music. Clara and Ethan mingled, her gown shimmering, his hands steady on her back. Nora approached during a quiet moment, her tablet dark now. "It's done," she said. "The internet's obsessed. Clara's trending as the billionaire's truth. They're calling it iconic." Ethan chuckled, pulling Clara closer. "She is." Clara leaned into him, her laughter a soft melody. She'd walked into judgment and walked out stronger, not because she'd won, but because she'd stayed true. The world would remember this launch, not for its wealth or scandal, but for the woman who'd faced a crowd and shown them what worth really meant. Clara Bennett Cole didn't need a spotlight. She was the light. She moved forward, serene, but the global ridicule burned, a wound no one could see. Then a voice cut through, deep and molten, stopping the world. "Take your hands off my wife." The crowd froze, phones still raised, laughter choking in throats. Clara paused, her lips parting in a small, private smile. Ethan stood at the top of the glass staircase, his charcoal suit sharp against the city skyline. At 41, he was a study in contrasts, lean and unassuming, with gray eyes that could warm a room or burn it down. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run a hand through it moments before. He'd built Aroma Vibe from a garage lab, a kid from Brooklyn with nothing but grit and a nose for scents. 10 years ago, he'd been nobody, mixing fragrances on a folding table while living off instant coffee. Clara had been there, his anchor, his truth, when the world saw only a dreamer with no shot. But the shock didn't end there. Ethan's gaze swept the crowd, his voice steady but laced with fire. "This is Clara Bennett Cole, my wife, and the creator of Luxe Essence." A collective gasp ripped through the atrium. Clara wasn't just his partner in life. She was the genius behind the perfume they'd all come to celebrate. The formula, the heart notes of jasmine and amber that had already sparked a bidding war among luxury brands, had been born in her mind, perfected in late-night experiments while Ethan handled the business. She'd chosen to arrive in simplicity, not only to test their kindness, but to prove that true brilliance needs no adornment. The crowd's cruelty had targeted the very woman whose vision they'd been clamoring to witness. Ethan reached Clara, his hand finding hers, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, meant only for her. She nodded, her hazel eyes softening. "Always, Ethan." He turned back to the crowd, his presence commanding, a man who'd faced boardrooms and critics, and never blinked. "You mocked her dress, her shoes, her heart. You called her a gold digger, sprayed perfume in her face, threw champagne, smeared caviar on her. But Clara isn't here for your approval. She walked away from a professorship at MIT to create something extraordinary, something you all came here to chase." The reception unfolded under a canopy of city lights, the venue's rooftop alive with lanterns and the soft hum of jazz. Clara and Ethan stood together, her obsidian gown shimmering like the Hudson below, his hands steady on her back as they greeted the humbled guests. The air was different now, charged with awe and quiet respect. The influencers, tycoons, and critics who remained watched Clara not as a spectacle, but as a force. A woman who'd faced their venom and emerged not just unscathed, but triumphant. Nora approached during a quiet moment, her tablet dark now. "It's done," she said. "The internet's on fire. Clara's trending as the alchemist of Luxe, the mind behind the scent that's already sold out pre-orders. They're calling her iconic." Ethan chuckled, pulling Clara closer. "She's more than that." Petit. Clara leaned into him, her laughter a soft melody, like the final note of a perfect fragrance. She'd walked into a storm of judgment and walked out stronger, not because she'd won, but because she'd stayed true to herself, to Ethan, to the vision they'd built together. The world would remember this launch not for its scandal or splendor, but for the woman who'd turned cruelty into a canvas, painting her truth in notes of jasmine and amber. Clara Bennett Cole didn't need a spotlight. She was the spark that lit the night.